Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you for coming this morning to our virtual class. This is the Kaballah Cafe, lesson number 283, slightly different format than our usual class. And again, just a reminder that if you can see where your mute button is, and if you can mute yourself, that would be great. If you click on your picture, when you see your own image, if you can click on it, you'll see there's a possible mute button. You just press mute. And when you need to ask a question, just go ahead and unmute, and then you can ask the question. I don't mind getting questions. We'll try to do it this week where we can get questions in the middle of the class. We'll see how that works. And then, again, if you're able to mute, and that would be fantastic. Of course, since the last time we've had this class, a lot of things have changed in the world that we live in, and a lot of interesting new changes for a lot of people. For myself and many other people, we suddenly now are running a homeschool. We've got 10 children now in a homeschool. 9 children, I'm saying, in a homeschool. And someone sent me a line recently. They said, you know, if you see me talking to myself tomorrow, it's because I'm having a parent-teacher conference. So it's a lot of people adjusting to a lot of new things. So I want to address the current situation a little bit and give it maybe a Kabbalistic perspective. I've mentioned before that in ancient Hebrew, it's interesting that the word that is used for crisis is the same word that we use for a birthing stool, which means that this is not by accident. It means that in the concept of a crisis in ancient Jewish thought, is a crisis is the beginning of the birth of something new. Just like when a woman gives birth, there are the birth pains before she gives birth, and it heralds that the pains and herald that there's something new about to come, a new life that is about to come. So too, the way God made the world is that every crisis is, by definition, it's there in order to give birth to something new. We've used the example many times before of the seed, that when you plant a seed in the ground, before it is able to sprout, it has to rot. It rots in the ground, and when it rots and it almost disintegrates, it becomes nothing, then new life can begin. And so really, this is how we approach every crisis, is we look at a crisis and say, okay, what is this the birth pangs to? What is about to be given birth to? What are the new possibilities that this crisis gives us? And in Kabbalah, the way the Kabbalah understands this goes back to the very, very beginning of creation, the way our world was created. Because in a sense, Kabbalah says our world began, the creation of this world really began with a crisis. It began with the concealment of God's energy. When he created this world, had to, as we've said many times before, remove himself slightly. He had to conceal himself to make room for the world, to make room for another reality.
You want me to go in the other room?
Again, if you're able to mute your button, if you're able to find the mute button, that would be great. So anyone who's got their sound on, if you could press mute, that would be fantastic. I can mute everyone here, but I'd rather you mute yourself so you can come back on when you need to.
See a mute button.
There should be a mute button on your screen. On your screen, when you press your screen, if you touch your screen, you should see somewhere where it says mute. Okay. And this is so the very beginning of creation. Just like when a teacher wants to teach something to a student, the teacher has to first, in many ways, conceal much of his deep wisdom in order to give a little bit of wisdom to that child so the child can understand something. The same is really true when we're dealing with the concept of creation. God has to conceal, has to hide his light, he has to hide his energy, and this allows creation to begin. He leaves room for creation. So really, in a certain sense, Kabbalah says the whole of reality begins with a crisis, with a concealment, with a darkness, with a setback. But that setback is the very seed through which God creates reality. And so in Kabbalah, we don't say that when we face a problem that we have to find the silver lining. What we understand is that the very purpose of the crisis is the silver. The very purpose of the crisis is birth, is something that's new that has to be created. That is its entire purpose. It doesn't have another purpose. When you say we have to find the silver lining, when we say we have to find the silver lining, this really means that we are saying it's a negative event, but there must be something positive as well. In Kabbalah, we don't say find the silver lining. In Kabbalah, rather, what we say is that we need to understand that the very purpose of the crisis, the very purpose of the cloud is the silver. The very purpose is the birth, is something new. And so I want to take a few moments today to possibly explore one of the possible new opportunities and really a new birth that this current crisis that we're facing in the world, this pandemic, may present us. One of the possible new opportunities. In the time of the year that we are in, this coming week, we're about to begin a new season in Jewish tradition, in the Jewish calendar. We're about to begin the month of Nisan, which represents a new season. In Kabbalah, we understand that time has character. When I mean that time has character, is that usually, conventionally, when we think about time, we understand and think about time in such a way that time is really has no color. It has no character. It's just the background to our world. Time just passes. There's no distinct or intrinsic difference between one moment of time and another moment of time. It's what we do in the time and what we fill the time with that might define the time, but time really is colorless. Time has no color. Time has no character. There's no intrinsic difference between one moment of time and another moment of time. But in Kabbalah, it doesn't work that way. In Kabbalah, we understand that every moment of time, there is a different godly energy that comes into this world. The energy of every moment of time is different, and it is really our job to be in tune to that energy and understand what the energy of the time is so that we can use that energy, capture that energy, and channel that energy in our service, in our mission. So, for example, if you think about someone who is sailing and they're using sails to sail in the water, what they have to understand is that they have to understand that the wind, they have to know which way the wind is blowing. And if they can understand which way the wind is blowing, they can harness that wind and use it in their sailing. And the same thing is true about time in Kabbalah. Every moment of time has an energy. Every moment of time has its own theme. And we try to capture that energy and use it in the way that we grow, in the way that we go about our lives. And so when we talk about the year, Kabbalah talks about the year in two halves. There is the half from Rosh Hashanah, from Tishrei, till Nisan, till Passover season. And then there's the half from the Nisan, from the Passover season, until Tishrei. 6 months of the year. We split the year into two, and each half has a general theme. What are the general themes of these two halves of the year? So the theme of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, till the month of Nisan, the theme is from below to above. It's a theme in which the initiation begins with us from below, and we are working our way up to try to become more spiritual. When we talk about, that is the Tishrei, the Rosh Hashanah till Nisan, till Passover. When we switch over from Nisan till Rosh Hashanah, it's another half of the year. The theme then really is about from above to below, a revelation from above to below. In the terms of, just to give an example to explain what I mean, when you think about a teacher and a student, so you can have two ways in which a student can learn. One is that the student just receives information from above. It's like frontal teaching, where the teacher just gives a lecture and the student is receiving. So that's from above, from the teacher, to below to the students. That's a flow from above to below. And then you can have where a student is able to figure certain things out on their own. They become a learner. They become a student that is able to decipher and figure things out on their own and come to revelation from below to above. There's, again, receiving the information from above or figuring it out from below. Now, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to each way. The advantage of the flow of information coming from above is that obviously because the teacher has so much more knowledge, they're able to, in a very short time, give over a tremendous amount of knowledge to the students, much of which the student would never be able to figure out on their own. Because the teacher is so much more advanced and so much more knowledgeable. But as far as how meaningful and how deep and how much it affects the student, because it's coming from outside of the student, it's much less meaningful to the student. But when a student figures things out on their own, on the one hand, it is far greater in the sense that it's much more meaningful, and it's something that is really connected with the student. The student is able to really integrate this information. It's what they figured out on their own. It's theirs. But obviously, the disadvantage is that they're not going to be able to achieve as much information and knowledge as if they would receive it from a teacher. And it's really true in our service of God. Sometimes God in our lives gives us inspiration. We can be inspired. We can get a flow from above, and it can lift us up. And there is an advantage, of course, that is sometimes we can receive a light and energy and inspiration that we would never be able to achieve on our own. The limitation being that it wasn't achieved by us, being that it wasn't ours, it came from above, it's less meaningful. It's not something that it comes, we got it for the moment, but then we lose it. Like that student who gets all the frontal teaching, crams for the test the night before, hopefully does a good job with the test, but 2 years later, if you ask them the information, probably forgot it by then because it wasn't that integrated with them. It wasn't meaningful. Whereas if they figure it out on their own, something you figure out by yourself, something you achieve by yourself, much more meaningful, and you have it, and it's yours, and you have it forever. So sometimes, again, with God can give you the inspiration from above. It's an amazing inspiration, but it isn't yours, or we can figure it out on our own. When we think about the 2 halves of the year, again, these are the themes of the 2 halves of the year. Rosh Hashanah until Nisan is us from below, figuring things out and working our way towards God. Nisan till Tishrei, from Pesach till Rosh Hashanah, that is more the energy of God revealing and giving us light and giving us inspiration. It's interesting because this is reflected in the holidays of these seasons. If you think about the holidays of Nisan, that's all about God revealing himself to us. We're in Egypt. We are far, far from God. God comes, reveals himself to us, and pulls us out of Egypt. There are all these revelations, all these miracles, all these the plagues, the splitting of the sea. God comes and basically pulls us out of Egypt. He reveals himself from above and takes us out. Even as we move from Passover to the next holiday, we come to Shavuot, which is the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, where God again reveals himself from above to give us the Torah. When we go to the other half of the year, Rosh Hashanah, the theme of Rosh Hashanah is all about the creation of man. And really the whole theme of that month is our trying to become better. Repentance, Yom Kippur, we need to grow, we need to change, we've made mistakes, we need to do a better job. So really we see a theme in the second half of the year. It's all about our service, not about a revelation from above. It's not about miracles. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur really don't celebrate miracles as much as they celebrate man's service of God, what we are doing, how we are trying to grow. So again, you have the Nisan energy from above to below, the Tishrei energy from below to above. I'm going to unmute everyone for a moment just to make sure that you don't have to have your microphones on. Just if by nod of head, is everyone okay? So far, so good?
Yes.
Good? Okay.
Yes.
And if you have a question, you can always let me know if you got a question.
Thank you.
Okay. Question. Someone has a question. Any questions? Okay. So we have these two energies. I'm just going to mute everyone again. I'll unmute it again a little bit later as well. So we got these two energies, and we have the same concept really also in the way we look at these months, Nisan and Tishrei, again, these two energies from above to below, from below to above. We find this not only in the holidays, we also find it in the way in which these parts of the year are in each one a head of the year, because we're told Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei, is the beginning of the year. If you ask any Jew, when is the head of the year? When is New Year's in Judaism? That's Rosh Hashanah. But interestingly enough, we have a system in Judaism where there's two cycles. There's the cycle of the year, and there's also the cycle of the months of the year. So though Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year, but it happens on the first day of the seventh month. That's very strange to a lot of people, because in the secular concept, if you have New Year's, that's also the first day of the first month, right? 1/1 in January 1 in the secular calendar is not only the beginning of the year, it's also the first month of the year, which makes sense. But in Judaism, things are always a little bit more complicated or a little bit more deep in a sense. And therefore, just because it's the beginning of the year, it doesn't mean it's the first month of the year. So Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year, but it's the seventh month. When is the first month of the year? That's Nisan. Nisan is the beginning of the months of the year. Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, is the beginning of the year. So there are two cycles. There's the year cycle and the month cycle, which makes sense in the sense that you have the year cycle is associated with the sun. Why do we have 365 days in a year? Because that's the cycle of the sun, where the earth goes around the sun. So we have the cycle of the sun. Why is a month approximately 30 days? That is the cycle of the moon. The waxing and the waning of the moon, the cycle of the moon, the lunar cycle, is approximately 30 days. So we've got two different systems. There's the moon system and the sun system. So there's a year and there's the months. When we deal with year, we're told, which is associated with the sun, represents nature from below, the natural world. This nature is unchanging. It has a cycle. The same thing happens every single day. Same thing every single day. Nature is a cycle. And if you look at the sun, the shape of the sun is the same every day. It has the same shape. The size of the sun is the same. It's unchanging. That's nature. The concept of a revelation from above, which is really God's miracles, His light and from above, means change. A miracle means it's not the same as it was. Something's changed, something unexpected. And if you look at the moon changes. It's changing, not like the sun. It's every night, it's a different shape. In fact, interesting that the word for year, in Hebrew, when you say the word year, again, associated with the sun, is shana. Shana means to repeat. It is connected to the word to repeat, like sheni, second, repeating, which means it's always the same. That's nature. That's the year. When you deal with the month, what is the name of a month in Hebrew? Chodesh. Chodesh comes from the word chadash. Chadash means something new. I'm actually going to bring up here for a moment, I'm going to share with you just a little worksheet I've made that it should come up on your screen now. You could see it now on your screen. So you can see here, the month of Nisan is a revelation from above. It is also, as opposed to Tishrei on the other side, which is a service of man from below. Nisan is a month of miracles. Tishrei is the energy of nature. Nisan is the head of the month. Tishrei is the head of the year. The moon changes. The sun is unchanging. Month is Chodesh, equals new. Year is Shana, equals repeat. So again, we now understand that we've got these two energies, one Nisan, one Tishrei, the two halves of the year, and they represent two very, very completely different energies. Okay, so I'm just going to unmute to see if anyone has any questions. If you have a question, now would be a good time. You have to unmute yourself if you're muted. If you have a question so far, you can ask that question. Any questions?
What?
Yes, Liz, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, my question is, could you repeat?
That he has the virus, and he has never had any symptoms.
Just speak as loud as you can.
Could you please repeat? What is? We are in what portion are we now from?
We are now just finishing up. We're just coming up to the last few days of the Rosh Hashanah until Nisan, which is that last week. Basically, we have the last few days of our service from below. But on Thursday, the month of Nisan will begin this Thursday. And when that begins, we enter a new energy. And the energy is about revelations and miracles from above. And that's the energy of the second half of the year. Again, going back to the example we gave earlier, that's like the teacher giving us the information from above rather than us figuring it out from below. Any other questions?
Yes. Can you put up the page again?
You want me to put that sheet back up again?
Just
Sure.
1 minute. For
Sure.
Thursday.
I'll put that back up again. And what you can do, by the way, is take a picture of on your phone of the screen, and then you've got it. Okay. So I'm going to put it back up for a moment here. Let's see. Okay. You can take a shot on your phone. That way you have it if you need it. But there's Nisan and there's Tishrei. You see the two halves and the different nature of the halves, the different energies of the two halves of the year.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Because I'd like to continue the class. There's more to go. Okay.
We're ready.
Okay, I'm going to mute everyone again, and then we're going to continue. I'll unmute later. So as we now see that there's these two energies, two possibilities. Again, when we figure things out from below, or when it comes to us from above. Sometimes we are working on things and we get to things and understand things through our own efforts. Sometimes we're given a gift and a revelation from above. There is an advantage and disadvantage to each one. There's the advantage when we do it ourselves, it's much more meaningful. It's much more close to us. It's something that we can digest, it's integrated, it becomes a part of us, so much more meaningful. When we get it from above, it's a much greater amount of light. Again, when I figure something out myself, that is so much more meaningful to me, and it stays with me forever, it becomes a part of me. But there's a limit to what my mind can figure out on my own. When a teacher gives it to me, a lot more light, a lot more energy, but it's less part of me because it's come from somewhere outside of me. It's not as meaningful to me. It's harder to really digest and make it a part of me. So we have an advantage and a disadvantage to each way. And we have two halves of the year that represent these two ideas. But in Hasidic thought, there is a fascinating concept that says that there is a way to combine both of those in one service. There's something that we can do, something in our life that we can do that on the one hand can be about our efforts, and it's really meaningful because it comes from ourselves, but at the same time, it's able to trigger a tremendous energy from above, which is beyond what we would usually be able to achieve on our own. So in other words, there's something magical that we can do that can combine both the advantages of the miracles from above and the natural efforts from below. Because usually when we do something, if let's say we try to do something in our spiritual growth, when we try to do something in our spiritual growth, what happens is it's limited to my capacities and my abilities. So whatever my capacities and abilities are, if I've got certain abilities, so my achievements will be according to those abilities. And my impact will be according to those abilities. But when I'm given a revelation from above, obviously that revelation is way beyond what I can achieve on my own. But again, the disadvantage is I didn't achieve it. It came as a gift. It's not mine. But there is something interesting that Kaballah says and Hasidic philosophy focuses on, that says that we're able to do that can combine both of those together in one. Where it's mine, I achieved it. At the same time, it's not limited to my limitations. It can trigger something way beyond my capacities. What is that? So Hasidic philosophy says there is a service or a spiritual path called bitul. Bitul means selflessness, putting oneself aside, self-effacement, transcending self. That is something we need to work on in life, that we try to be less focused on self. We try to be more focused on mission, on purpose. Again, as we always say, that working on trying to change that perspective from what I need in life to what I'm needed for. Or as sometimes we say, when you find yourself in a situation, the wrong question to ask, there are two possible questions when something goes wrong in life. The wrong question to ask is, why is this happening to me? That's the wrong question. The right question to ask is, what am I being called upon to do now at this time? What is my mission in this situation? What is God asking of me now that I find myself in this compromised situation? One's focused on me, why is this happening to me? Feeling sorry for ourselves. The other is, yes, this is not a great situation, but my focus is on what's my calling now? What am I being called upon to do in the current situation? What is my mission? That's what we talk about bitul. Bitul means self-effacement, transcending self. So what's amazing about this part of spiritual service is that on the one hand, we are the ones achieving it. We're working on it. We're working to become more selfless. It's something, the effort, we have to make that effort. It's not something that just happens. We have to work on that. It's a perspective. It's a way to think. It's a paradigm shift. It's working to think in a different way. And also when we catch ourselves being sorry for ourselves or focused on ourselves, we have to say that's toxic, that's negative. Let me transcend that. So it's a work. It's something, it doesn't just happen naturally. The natural state is me, I need to protect myself and I'm worried about myself. Transcending ourselves requires effort. So it's our work, but because it's the very work is that it's not I, it's not about me. I recognize that it's not me that this is all about, and that my achievements aren't really even my own. So in a certain sense, because of that, we're able to transcend our own limitations. In other words, when I serve God based on my capacities, it's limited to my capacities. But when my service is that it's not about my capacities, about transcending my capacities, not I, then the revelation I'm able to achieve and what I'm able to bring down is not limited to me, because this is not about me. It's about something beyond me. So it's, for example, when Moses goes to redeem the Jewish people and he says to God, but I don't have the ability to do this. God says, you're right. It's not about you. It's about me, and I'm going to do this through you. And when we put ourselves aside and we allow things beyond us to flow through us, then we have, on the one hand, we've achieved it because we are the ones putting ourselves aside. But because we're putting ourselves aside, what's able to happen is we're able to be a vessel for an energy way beyond us. So on the one hand, it's ours. On the other hand, we've made ourselves now a vessel for an energy that goes from a much higher place. And that's what Kaballah says. There is a way for us to combine both Nisan and Tishrei, both that it's an effort from below, but at the same time, we make ourselves a vessel for a revelation from a much higher place from above. This is really the Hasidic teachings of why bitul, why self-effacement is so important, because self-effacement really is, and transcendence of self is really that ability to achieve something on our own. It's ours, but because it's about not I, it opens ourselves and it allows us to be conduits to an energy that's way beyond ourselves. So it's both what I've created, it's mine, it's meaningful, I made this, but at the same time, it's about not I, so we are able to be a conduit for an energy that is way beyond ourselves. We are able to allow and experience an energy that is not limited to our abilities, because it's not about my abilities, it's not about my capacities. It's about recognizing that I'm not the one achieving things. It's coming from way beyond myself. Like Moses, who goes to Pharaoh, he knows it's not him. He's not going with his power, he's going with God's power. And because he's going with God's power, it's him going, he achieves that self-effacement, but that self-effacement allows him to be a conduit for an energy that's way beyond himself. And that is how we combine both of those energies together. I'm going to unmute to see if there's questions, and then we'll move on to continue to the last part of the class. Any questions at this time? You have a question, you can unmute yourself if you want, and you can ask the question. Okay, I always say that's a good sign. Either no one understands a word I'm saying, or it's clear. Okay, so let me put everyone back on mutes. Okay, and again, we'll open up for questions at the end as well. There'll be more questions at the end. If you want to clarify things, you can always ask me privately as well. So this is really, in Hasidic thought, a very, very innovative and a very deep way in which we're able to combine both of those energies together. It's by not necessarily by what we do in life, but by achieving this sense of self-effacement, self-transcendence, which again combines my achievements. I'm the one who has to be more selfless. I'm working on that at the same time, because by definition, I'm saying it's not I'm able to be a conduit for things that are way beyond me. And this is how we combine these two energies together. I would like to suggest possibly that as we began this class today, and we said that in Judaism, every crisis is a birth of something new, that it's not that we look for the silver lining, that we understand that the very purpose of a crisis, the very purpose of a setback, is the creation of something new that wasn't possible before. And this is the way God creates the world. He has to create a crisis of God's concealment to allow space for the world to come into being. So that means that is the source of every crisis in our world. Every crisis, though obviously painful and difficult, and something that we pray that comes to an end as soon as possible, but we also understand that when it's there, it is an opportunity, and it is really the birth of something new. So I would like to suggest that in many ways, the current state of affairs has really been a very humbling, or it has the potential to be very humbling for us human beings. In living in a world that we live today, in which we have become so advanced with technology and science and medicine, sometimes we believe in ourselves and our capacities and abilities a little too much. And we begin to believe that we are able to use these technologies and these capacities to control our world and to be in control of our lives. And that we are the gods, that we are the ones in control, and we can really guarantee our future. We're able to secure and to know what the future is going to bring. We are the gods in this world. And in many ways, this event has really, in many ways, been very humbling to realize how fragile our world is, this amazing world that we live in and we've created, how fragile and small it is, how a tiny virus has brought the entire world to its knees, markets, medical systems, governments, how this virus has completely upended all of these systems, and reminded us how fragile and how small we are, and reminded us that we have very little control, and that we do need to look upwards to God to pray, and that we may have plans, but I don't think anyone, if you would have asked them a year ago that they would be in the situation they're in now, could have predicted this situation. So really, in many ways, if you contemplate on what is going on and what is happening in the world around us, one of the conclusions that we can come to is the sense of how small, fragile, vulnerable we really are. And in a certain sense, there's a sense of humility when we stand in front of God and we realize how little control that we really have in life, and how dependent we are on His good graces and on His blessings, and how fragile and vulnerable life is. There is a certain opportunity for achieving a greater humility, for achieving a greater sense of understanding how small we are really in God's world, in the universe. And that humility and transcendence of self, and understanding that we are not the focus and the focal point of everything, that we are here to serve something beyond ourselves, is really a tremendous, tremendous critical piece in our spiritual advancement. And as I said, it has that capacity to combine both our efforts at the same time with an energy that comes from way above. What I'm going to do now is take a moment to run through a few moments to run through a review sheet like we always do that I'm going to share here. You can, again, take a picture on your phone if you want to save it to go over it afterwards. And we'll take questions after that. So let me go ahead and share that. Okay, Kaballah Cafe, lesson 283, crisis as birth. In ancient Hebrew, the word for birthing stool is the same as the word for crisis. This is based on the philosophy that the very purpose of a crisis is to give birth to a new reality. In Kabbalah, this goes back to the first crisis and setback, which is the concealment at the beginning of creation. This means that it is not about finding a silver lining, rather it is seeing the crisis as a birth. Kabbalah sees the two halves of the year as two different energy flows. From Nisan to Tishrei, it is about revelation from above. From Tishrei to Nisan, it is about a revelation from below, what we achieve from below. This is reflected in the themes of the holidays, celebrating the two halves of the year. As we mentioned, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and even Sukkot, which is a continuation of Yom Kippur, is all about our penitence, our needing to change, our work from below. And Nisan, of course, is all about the revelation from above and the miracles and God giving us the Torah. Number 5, Nisan celebrates miracles from above associated with the changes of the moon, right? Which is the changes which represent something new, something different, while Tishrei celebrates consistency of nature associated with the unchanging nature of the sun. And number 6, there is one type of service that combines the advantages of both systems. Bittul, selflessness, is your effort, but it is not defined by your limitations, so the revelation is infinite. And therefore, combines both your efforts, but it allows you to be a conduit, and it opens you up to revelations that are way beyond yourself. And this is the possible birth in this crisis, at least one of the possible opportunities in this crisis, is that if we really do contemplate, and I'm gonna unshare this in a moment. If you need to take a picture of it on your phone, if you'd like, you could do that. But this is really one of the opportunities in the crisis that we face. There is really if you contemplate on what is taking place and how this has affected the world, it really is in some ways very, very humbling to realize how small we are with all our technology, all our medicines, and all our capacities in the modern world that we live in, how really fragile, vulnerable, and small we are. And I think that should lead us to a greater sense of humility. And that humility, again, opens us up to a deeper relationship with God and going beyond ourselves and understanding how small we really are and how we can put ourselves aside for something way beyond ourselves. So I'm going to open up the unmute, and if you have any questions, we'll take a few minutes for some questions. Okay, questions if anyone has questions or comments or thoughts. If anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments.
I have a question, if you don't mind, Rabbi.
Yes, speak up, please.
Okay, so can't help but notice, really what you were talking about from the second half, or the first half of the year, or from Rosh Hashanah around to Purim, basically is top down, and
Right.
About our window.
Pesach on
The other way around. Rosh Hashanah is from the bottom, from below up.
Yeah. Okay. So with the coronavirus hitting at the particular time, basically in between Purim and Pesach,
Right.
we have two different redemptions. And one redemption, it's from Hashem's will, it's from above. However, from the redemption from Purim, it's basically Mordecai says we must do tshuva.
Right.
So I'm kind of struck by it's a difference between one redemption is coming strictly from Hashem, the other one is also coming from Hashem, but it's basically we have to self-acknowledge what's going on, and I think it's kind of interesting that now it's in a time of it's in a situation where this kind of falls right in between the two.
Right.
So I guess what's our role? What is it that we need to do at this?
So I think that's really what touches what I was saying now, that really this concept of humility and learning our vulnerability and learning to celebrate that vulnerability is really a combination of both of those energies together. It's our efforts, which is half of the year, and it's also Nissan in the sense that we open ourselves to a revelation that's way beyond ourselves. So I think that's what we're talking about, is combining those two together, combining both our efforts and at the same time allowing ourselves to be a conduit to an energy that is way beyond ourselves. And that's really what we talked about today. I think that's what we're in, this cross section between these two times of the year, which again, combining those two energies together. Other questions? Anyone has any other questions?